insider look into who I talk to and get to know the people on the podcast so that they can promote the podcast. So I want to thank you for being here. I know you are busy and the work that you do is so important, and I'm grateful that you take the time. I'm maybe a little bit fangirling because I only ran across you really recently. I think in the past maybe 6 months, your stuff started
Yeah.
coming into my feed. So I don't know if you're new to the social media scene. I know that you were, doing diversity work in public housing and all that. It will get to your bio, but I'm really loving the way that you're putting together your content. It's really engaging and it's beautiful to look at. And you're so nice on it. You never seem to get angry on it.
I will tell you that is uh, a lot of I'm extremely intentional and boundaried up with how I navigate social media.
Okay.
And also too, you're talking about, therapy and whatnot. Like I'm going to be seeing my therapist this week as well. Uh, and so just like mental health is really important to me, and I can
Oh, I
recognize
love hearing
certain
that.
ways that I have to, yeah, like I recognize certain ways that I have to be in order to do this work long term.
I'm
And so that's just like it's so much more about caring about my own mental health. And then it just so happens that there's a lot of positive response to it. But it's not necessarily really for them. It's really just more for me because
okay.
if I can't have my joy as I'm doing this
Yes,
work,
I
I will
know.
burn out. I will fry.
Uh-huh.
I will have
Uh-huh.
panic attack. Like it's just too much
Uh-huh.
if I'm not, trying to figure out that
Balance.
balance. So
I
yes,
am
yes,
grateful to hear you specifically say that you seek out mental health treatment and that you have a therapist. I really need Black folks. And I just call us Black folks. I'm Canadian. I'm not African American. My folks are from Barbados. I live in Canada. And make no mistake, that imaginary boundary that divides our two countries doesn't mean white people aren't going to be white. Okay, so just so we are clear,
right.
we have racism here. We have disproportionate punishment here. We have people who may not be shot and killed by the police, but are injured and maimed by the police here. So, the system of policing here is exactly the same as the system of policing in the United States, with the only caveat being we don't have the same gun culture. So, guns are highly regulated here, so we don't have the same gun culture, but we do have the same problems with what I call not the judicial system, the punishment system, the punitive system, because we're not trying to help people find their way and find their way back to their humanity or take care of themselves or change the systemic issues that cause people to, participate in the judicial, punishment system. We're not doing any of that. We're just indiscriminately punishing people. And so with all of that comes the bullshit of racial discrimination and everything else that happens there. So I just want to make it clear to you, in Canada, where people think it's some kind of utopian whatever, it is not. Ask the Black
Yes, yes,
person.
yes.
Just ask the Black brown
I
person.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I have a couple of acquaintances that are also Black Canadian, and I've worked with a couple of clients from Canada as well.
So
And I'll
you
say
know.
that yes, I've consistently heard same thing that you're saying right now. And it's interesting that I see that in a lot of other Western countries. Well, I'll say
Yeah.
a
Oh, they're
lot of
white
Western,
colonized.
predominantly white countries.
Yeah.
What it is that in the U.S uh, we have such a culture of news and
Yeah.
kind of publicity around racism type
Yeah.
stuff that a lot of other countries don't
Yeah.
have. So a lot of other countries
Mm-hmm.
assume they're like, oh man, the U.S. is so racist, but not us in Europe. Like, really?
No. Oh, yeah.
Racist? Like,
Really.
you're a European country? Like, it's a hot
Any
mess.
country, yeah, it's any country that was, in my opinion, in my arrogant opinion, with my tiny little social science degree, any country that has been colonized by Europe, any country that has been colonized by Europe is going to have that underlying, colonial system and colonized mindset and white superiority and supremacy mindset. So anywhere where that has happened, there's going to be racism, and there's going to be bigotry and structural racism. So let's jump into this. We've been just like casually talking. That's how this is going to go. We're just going to keep going. But I'm going to read your bio if that's okay. And
Sure
welcome
thing.
you to the
Thank you.
podcast. Like in the official sense. That was like the pre-show.
We here. We here. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey everyone, welcome
Oh,
to the
and
Intentional. Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, I just wanted to mention one thing. Because I'm in Tanzania, whenever I do online stuff, sometimes there's like a 2 second delay. So if it feels like I'm
Okay.
talking over you, it's because of the delay. So just to give you that heads up.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. I'll
All right.
work with it. We'll roll with the punches. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Intentional Well-Being Podcast. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. My extra special guest today is Tony Neighbors. You may know him. I've shared his stuff on my Instagram as Racial Equity Insights. I have only kind of stumbled across him the last 6 months, but I'm a huge fan and I love to share your work on my platform. Thank you for allowing me to share it, and thank you for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've really appreciated your support, and this year has been such a wild year of social media and life and things. So there's been a
All
lot
the
to talk
things.
about for sure.
Yeah, and we are going to jump into it. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tony Neighbors. He is the principal consultant and owner of Racial Equity Insights. And don't worry, I'm going to link to all of this in the show notes, but you can find him at racialequityinsights.com. In his former position, he was the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the United States Public Housing Authority. He has 20 years of experience, so he is not new to the game because we know that DEI has become popular in the last 5 or 6 years, but you have been doing the work for over 2 decades. He's passionate about moving people and organizations from hesitation and trepidation, which I love, to confidence and effectiveness in their commitments to advancing racial equity. His skills include anti-racism training, consulting, strategy development, public speaking, team leadership, group facilitation, and program management. He believes strongly in communication and is very intentional about communicating with challenging subjects in a way that everybody from beginners to veterans in anti-racism education will remain engaged, understand, and eager to participate. He loves to incorporate audio and visual media and photography to amplify the effectiveness of his work. So in the last year, he's provided services for healthcare providers, insurers, housing, nonprofit, colleges, music and art organizations, international funding, mental health support. The list goes on and on and on. And he is epic at putting together some incredible content on Instagram, which I appreciate. A big warm welcome to Tony Neighbors. The crowd goes wild. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to see your shining face, and I'm very, very jealous that you're joining us from Tanzania today. I need to get to the continent. I need to get back to Mother Africa and feel like I want to feel what it's like to put my feet in the earth. How's it going, and what takes you to Tanzania?
Yeah. So yeah, it the beach and the water and the ground and the nature and the sun just hits different over here. That is
Yeah,
for sure.
I bet.
And so my wife and I, we had been talking about visiting the motherland for a good little while. And we had
Mm-hmm.
some friends from a long time ago, some Tanzanian friends that lived in Seattle where we were at a long time ago that we met. So that
Mm-hmm.
put Tanzania specifically in our mind. Fast forward, things are going well in terms of business. I transitioned to doing my consulting work full time. I'm officially a digital nomad. So if I have electricity and internet, I can do my work everywhere.
I love it.
Um, yeah, so things just kind of worked out for us to make a visit. We visited for about 5 weeks this time last year. We liked it a lot, and then game planned all throughout the year, and then made the move in September of 2022.
Oh, so you live there.
Yes.
So now I'm
This is
on a
I'm
whole
in our
new
rental
level.
house.
Oh my gosh, I'm in a whole new level of envy because I hear so many people going back to the motherland, and that's definitely something I think about all the time. But I really enjoy talking to you. If you're interested in the pre-show, you can join us on Patreon. We had the little talk before, but I had a whole meltdown on poor Tony, who doesn't know me. I melted down because there's a lot going on in the world right now. So you and I are
Yes.
talking on the heels of the death of Tyree Nichols, and I will continue to say his name and I will continue to talk about it because back in 2020, when George Floyd died, a lot of people made a lot of promises about how they were going to change and how they were going to show up, and the whole world, because we were on lockdown for COVID, seemed to be engaged in changing policing and changing the way Black folks, and we're specifically talking about anti-Black racism today, was going to change. And I said to everybody, give it a year. If you are really committed to this, let's circle back in a year and see what's happened. Fast forward 2 years later, 2022 has been the deadliest year for police violence in the United States, and I would hazard to say everywhere else in the world. So what have we not learned? I know this is a heavy question for you. What have we not learned? What are we not doing? What is missing? How is it that we can't stay engaged? And why is it like 50, 60 years past the civil rights movement, we can't seem to get ahead? Right? Nothing has actually really changed. In my opinion, I might be a little emotional bitter today, but this is where I'm at. What are your thoughts?
Hey, that is what it is. So that's a giant. That's a heck of an
I
opening
know.
question, Diane.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
no, you're good because these are important questions, right? They're really important questions for us to be thinking about, talking about, and trying to sort through.
Yeah.
So I was having a conversation related to this with my wife earlier today, and something that I like that there's a pattern to this at this point in time. Um, and it's an interesting and very depressing phenomenon that
Mm.
we, and I say we just sort of in the capital W collective
The
society,
collective we. Yeah.
the collective we essentially just sort of jump to the tune of news media.
Mm-hmm.
Because this stuff is happening on a daily
Daily
basis all
basis.
across the
Yep.
country, all across the US. You're
All
talking
across the
about things
world.
happening in Canada, all
Yep.
over the place. This stuff is
Yep.
happening. Anti-black racism is a global phenomenon, right? I see that show up in Africa. That's gonna be a different conversation.
Right.
And
I'll have
it's
to have you
much more
back.
subtle. Yeah, right. It's much more subtle, significantly less dangerous, but it's here. It's
Mm-hmm.
subtle. But
Mm-hmm.
what happens is, for whatever reason, the news media will grab onto specific stories and just
Mm-hmm.
decide that they're going to cast them all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And then the world gets into an uproar about, oh my gosh, this thing happened. It's awful. It's unjust. And then people get so activated and they're talking about it. But then the news moves on to something else because they need to hold your attention. And when something feels fresh, it gets attention. But then if it's not fresh, they're not getting their ad revenue, right? And so the news stops
Mm-hmm.
talking about it for a while. Everybody goes back to normal, forgets to care about black people, forgets to care about racism, and just go on with life. And these are things that, of course, we as black people, we don't have the luxury of just moving on like everything is okay and wrapped up. We don't have the
Mm-hmm.
luxury of only caring about this when it hits the news. But that's how kind of most people are is, oh, this is trending. This is the big thing. Even organizations like, whoa, we should do something about this because everybody's talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
But are you really about that life? Are you about that life even when nobody's talking about it? Are you about that life even when there is challenge, even when people don't like you, when there's pushback? Are you about that life when there could be cost to you, where people might not want to connect with you or talk to you anymore? It might cost you a job. I've seen spaces even at protests and organizations where not like white people are putting their bodies physically in between abusive law enforcement and black and brown people who
Mm-hmm.
are protesting and speak. Like, I see that kind of stuff. But that is rare, right?
It
That's
is
not a
rare.
very common thing. It's
No.
one thing to, type your fingers away on social media because everybody's talking about it. There's a whole other thing to commit to a truly anti-racist life.
Why is that so hard for non folks of the non-global majority to commit? Uh, I have these conversations around racial equity all the time, and I came to be in the similar work that you do through the lens of mindfulness and yoga and self-care,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
because I was in so many yoga teacher trainings where I was the only Black person, and I would see like this. bigotry kind of boil up. I've had it even boil up in teacher trainings that I have taught, which shocks me because I'm pretty transparent about who I am and what I believe. Why are we so lax? Why is it that, people cannot commit long term to making a change? Like, I've seen video after video where you see, non people who are not of the global majority, like you said, wedging themselves between abusive law enforcement and a Black person, but it's extremely rare. Why do white folks say they're going to change and make changes and then can't or won't?
Yeah. So this is, I would say, this is significantly based off of my observations and my
Yes,
experiences and
of
conversations I've
course.
had, etc. Um, but a lot of white folks are more intent, are more focused on. I say they're more focused on their own reputations as people
Okay.
not wanting to we want to be seen as not racist, or they want people
Yes.
to see them as progressive, or they want to sort of have
Right.
this reputation that is very white centered, as opposed
Right.
to being focused on things that maybe they don't necessarily feel they directly benefit from at all.
Right.
Or maybe it's
Right.
stuff that, again, there can be cost to it. And it's interesting. So I recently had a very surprising and very rapid growth on Instagram. Like, just last month, my page just blown up with
Blew up.
anyway. But the
Yeah.
post, so there was one post that I shared that kind of kicked that off. And I
Okay.
shared a post where I just asked, I said, hey, white people who care about anti-racism, what is your why for anti-racism? Here are
I
three
saw that
bad
post.
motivators. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
Yes,
here are
I
three
saw
bad
that.
motivators that could compromise your
Yep.
stuff, right? And it was interesting. It's so interesting just seeing the conversations in there,
Yeah.
because a lot of people were just sort of like, oh, I absolutely base my why off of myself and how people see
Mm,
me. Or, yeah, like, what are people going to think about me? How do people see me? How will people, trust me or relate to me? Or, like, so much of this me, 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 uh,
mm,
which is never a space that's going to lead to sustained commitments. And that's why I asked the question, is that if you don't have a transcendent reason or rationale to do this work, you will not sustain this work. Best case scenario, you will not sustain the work. Worst case scenario, you think you'll be sustaining the work, but you're actually going to be doing harm because your primary thought pattern, which is often not even noticed by people. It's often,
right.
something that happens subconsciously, but it's based off of the me, me, me. It's based off
Mm,
this individualism, this, kind of
mm,
individual reputation, as opposed to
mm,
seeing oneself as part of the global community. And there's, oh gosh,
right.
I'm going to paraphrase this. Diane, if you know the quote, I'm blanking on the full quote, but it's something along the lines of the need for, gosh, I hate that I'm going to be paraphrasing this. This is like
That's
a famous
okay.
quote.
Okay, that's
But
okay. We'll
it's a
find it and
quote.
we'll share it.
Please, please do correct me,
Yeah.
get the name of the person who said it. But something along the lines of that I'm not looking for people to do me a favor or help me.
Right. Yeah.
But, like, you need to realize that your liberation is wrapped up in my liberation.
Absolutely.
You've
It's
heard, you've heard
maybe,
that quote. You've heard that quote.
yeah, maybe Bell Hooks, maybe Audre Lorde. I know a queer Black woman has said it, but again, I might be wrong. I will find it and I will quote it. But yeah, that your
Thank
liberation is
you. And
wrapped up
tell
in
me
my.
too, or I'll have to Google it too
Yeah.
later.
I will share it with you when I find it. But I understand. I get that. And when I look at in like indigenous populations, and I look at um, Black and brown culture, I kind of noticed that we tend to be, and I said this in a workshop I did last week, we tend to be more focused on community. And we can see that in voting patterns, right? Where we vote so that we are all that we all rise, whereas I find that white culture tends to be a little bit more individualistic. And this again has just been my own ignorant observation or my own ignorant or opinion, that I notice when I'm in community with Black folks and I meet Black folks for the first time, there's this instant connection with each other. Even though we don't know each other, even though we'll be from different countries, we'll see each other, we'll find each other, we'll connect with each other, and we'll hold each other up regardless. And I don't find the same to be that way in white culture just by my observations and doing this work. And I think it's really unfortunate that we don't understand, and this is what yoga teaches us, that we are literally in this together, that white folks have the work to do and Black folks have the work to do. And I love to hear in our previous conversation that you take care of your mental health, that you said it. I'm very intentional in the way I share this information, and I'm very intentional in sharing it from this place where it brings me joy. Explain to me how you got there, because I am slowly sliding into this place of despair because I don't see the changes, and it's making me feel like this is almost pointless at this point.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that question. Um, yeah, I appreciate that question because you're going to allow me to get personal in ways that I would really want to get personal here. Um, I am blanking, and this is like a shame because these stories happen so often. I don't even remember which story it was, but it was around 2016, 2017-ish. There was another awful story of a black person that had been murdered by police. And I'm sure I could Google and find the name, but it was one of these
There's
big
so many.
stories.
Just pick one.
There's
Just
so
pick one. There's so
many,
many.
which is
Just
just,
pick one.
ugh,
Just pick one.
there's
Yeah,
so
just pick
many.
one.
But it was
Yeah.
one of these big, big news stories. Um, and I was just, diving straight in, reading all the things, having frustration from people who are, following that recurring trend that, an unarmed black person gets murdered, and then everybody demonizes the black person,
Of course.
and then
Mm-hmm.
uplifts all of the virtues of the white police officer who murdered him.
Of
Like it
course.
was one of those stories. And that was
It's a Tuesday.
happening.
A Tuesday. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So that had
Mm-hmm.
happened. Simultaneously, I had just done a family move cross country to Texas to be closer to my wife's family.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas has a very interesting just kind of culture
Yep.
in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not gonna throw a blanket over the entire state, but just to say that there are certain ways that conservatism
Yeah.
manifests that is
In
deeply
Texas.
uncomfortable for me. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
there's
get
ways
that.
that shows up. Um, so that was happening. Trump had just been elected. Just a lot of stuff happening at the same time. And I had like a complete like anxiety breakdown. Like it was too
Yep.
much. I could not function. I felt severe, intense fear in my body. I had never experienced anything like that before in my life. I did anti-anxiety medication for like a year. I was seeing a therapist. Like I just had to go
Mm,
into extreme self-care, mental health overdrive because it was so bad. It was like I literally cannot function like this. So
yeah.
I need to change something. Something needs to change. I'm still committed to
Mm,
this work.
mm,
This has been my commitments, my education, my expertise, my
mm-hmm.
experience. Like this is what my life is about. Outside of doing family stuff and caring for my children, like I teach people
Mm-hmm.
about anti-racism and racial equity. So it's like if I'm going to continue to do this in any way, shape, or form, I need to find a way where I am true to myself, where I am honest, where I am,
Yeah.
speaking and saying everything that needs to say, and in
Mm-hmm.
such a way where I'm focusing on, where I'm also intentional on who my audience is. My audience
Mm,
specifically is people who understand that this is important and they want to
mm-hmm.
figure out how to get involved and make a change.
Yeah.
My audience is not people who need to be convinced that this work matters or that this
Right.
work is valid.
Yeah. I'm
I
done with that
will
too.
not
I'm
spend,
out.
yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Not here to convince you of
It is
anything.
just, I won't do it. I won't do it.
No,
And as a
it's not
matter of
worth it.
fact, like on social media, if somebody pops into my comment section and they want to debate whether this is a
Yeah.
real thing or not, or they tell me it, block, instant block.
Yep.
Like
Blocked and blessed.
I
I
will
don't
not
have
do it.
time. No. No. Sorry.
Exactly, exactly. And
Find somebody
so,
else.
exactly. And so, I follow. I follow, I don't know, 700 something people on Instagram. And many of them I followed before I turned this into a platform because I have friends, family, etc. I am certain that my block list is significantly more than that, like maybe double, triple times my follower list.
I
I
can give
am
you a
not
hand.
playing, Diane. I block.
Good. I love to hear that. Sonia Renee Taylor
Yeah.
says, be blocked and be blessed.
Snap, 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 snap. And that's the thing where I have to. Like, I want to teach, I want to equip, I want to empower. Um, I don't want to do that other stuff. Like, there are some people who actually have really great educational platforms where they spend a lot of time disproving people who are racist
Yeah,
and awful and, spit out their racist, awful stuff. I mean, for me, that destroys my soul. I can't
totally.
do that. Like, I
Yeah.
might occasionally, like I actually, I have a piece of content I'll be making, I don't know, sometime in the near future, just showing some screenshots of some of the just horrible stuff I get because I think people
I
need to
bet.
know that
Yeah.
even with how I am so intentional with how I teach, I'm so
Yeah.
intentional with my word choices, with my energy, with my joy, with my empowering, and even still, I get the most horrid, awful, evil
Mm-hmm.
stuff I've ever heard in my
Mm-hmm.
entire life. Just
I
because I'm
bet.
talking about race. I'm talking about race and
Yep.
racism. I'm talking about facts. I'm speaking authoritatively as a black person on social media. And even
Yep.
just that, sometimes just speaking authoritatively on a subject as a black person just sets people off. And then the fingers get
Totally.
the typing and the will actually comes out and whataboutism comes out. And people have a really
Ugh.
hard time staying on topic. Um, and, just immediate racism for some people.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that it's a significantly smaller number compared to people
Mm-hmm.
who are like, oh, this is helpful. I'm learning. I'm engaged. I've gotten so much love, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's definitely there's been a not inconsequential number of terrible people too.
Uh, they're always out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, they tend to be loud. I don't understand. They're the ones who
They're
vote and they're
loud,
the ones that are loud. I hate that.
loud and wrong, and very confident in the loud and
Oh my
wrong.
god. So, my one of my girlfriends who teaches feminism at the university has a shirt that says, "I want to be as confident as a mediocre white man." When she wears that on campus, I'm like, "You go on. You go on."
You know
Loud
what
and
though?
wrong.
Like, let me tell you, let me tell you. So, there is this, not this is I love that quote. I've definitely heard that quote. There is kind of legitimately something to be said. So there was and anybody fact check me because I don't have the study on top of my head, but I remember reading about a study in the past that was talking about people applying for jobs. And this
Oh yeah.
particular thing, okay, so I'll say you've probably heard about it, but it was something along the
I
lines
have.
of, okay, where for like a white man applying for a job, any random given job, that if they meet like 60% of the job qualifications, they're going to apply for it more often than not. They're at least going to apply for it, see how it goes. They might even get hired for it, right? But then I
Probably.
want to say that the same study talked about black women, and it was like over 100% of the qualifications. And then a black woman was likely to apply for a position. And there's so much obvious experience and rationale and misogynoir and things that happen that cause people to do that. But then
Hmm.
the oppression that we experience then becomes so kind of ingrained into our thought patterns and our belief systems that sometimes we won't even go after opportunities because
Yeah.
this
Oh yeah.
we've sort of been programmed by this oppression that we experience. And so there's something kind of
Hmm.
to be said where it's like, what these dudes are applying with not barely over half of the qualification. Like, I can at least put my application. Like, let me at least
Yeah.
slide this paperwork over, right?
Yeah, that I'm overqualified. I heard a study, and I'll have to look it up as well, where they took a group of Black students at Harvard and had them write a test. Just told them they were writing a test for whatever reasons they were doing a study. Everybody wrote a test. And then they gave another group of Black students the same test and said they were going to be marked against white students. The first group did extraordinarily well. The second group did hideously badly when they knew they were going to be scored against their white counterparts. And that's that internalized racism. That's that constantly being told you're nothing, you don't contribute, you drag down the system. And I just am like, as Black History Month rolls up upon us now, and everybody's going to be putting out their performative Black History Month thing, I want people to actually look at what Black folks have contributed to the global culture. We're not talking about North America. We're talking about the world. There's no place in the world where Black people have not had influence. Culture, music, education, mathematics, you name it. I say to people, do you like your ice cream? Did you know a Black man created the refrigerated truck so that you could get groceries in your grocery store? Do you stop at a stoplight? Did you know a Black person created a stoplight? And we created those things around the time of enslavement and reconciliation to make our lives easier, because we were the ones who were doing the manual labor. We were trying to figure out how to make our lives. We have so much ingenuity that we've shared with the world, and the world would not be where it is now without the contributions of Black culture. And along the way, when we get up and we get our own boots and we start pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, then whiteness comes and sabotages us. Have we heard of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre? Do you know about Central Park? Like, we get ourselves together, we do our own thing, we start thriving, people look over and go, oh, we can't have that. And then we get sabotaged, and then we turn around and are told that we're nothing. And people don't know this history. They don't teach this in school. And now there's this big push for white children not to feel bad about themselves. So we can't teach the truth of history. And we wrap that all up in, we're not teaching critical race theory. We never taught critical race theory in grade school or high school. It was always in university. And I believe, if I'm wrong, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, a graduate degree program. Because when I was in university, there was no course called critical race theory. I don't remember taking any of that in history or any of my political science or sociology courses. So you would have to seek that out. And so now, in order to not teach the truth of history, we're just going to wrap it up and call any history that we teach, including Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, like historical figures that you cannot ignore. We're just going to call that critical race theory. I mean, how do we get away with doing this? And why, in a country where everybody's quick to call out people, are we not calling this out? Like, why is there not a harder push by, heaven forbid, the Democrats or anybody else in the world to stop this banning of books, to stop this? We have to tell the truth of history or we're doomed to repeat it. Isn't that how the quote goes? Yeah, look at you. I'm giving you all the hardest questions ever.
Yeah, you
sorry. I'm on a tangent today.
You're going to get me in trouble. You're going to get me in trouble, Diane.
No. I'm not going to get you in trouble. It's all my fault. I asked the question.
No, but see, gosh, so I feel like there's a couple of questions in there. I think one response might get me in slightly more trouble than the other response, but I'll just start talking, and then you tell me if I miss anything or if we just want to, we'll go how we go. But
okay,
especially talking about like the political parties and like what's up with what's up with Democrats, what's up with political parties. This is another like very much Tony opinion, and I'll claim my own opinion as it is.
We're just talking.
But,
we're just chatting.
We're just talking.
This is just us.
We're just talking.
Yeah, we're just talking. These are our opinions, folks. So if you have a problem with that, you can leave me a comment. Don't come for Tony.
There you
asked
go.
The question.
There you go. Thank you. Well, I like to clarify that too, because I do so much teaching, right? I do so much teaching, but I have to clarify, this ain't really teaching. That's just me telling you what I think.
We're just talking.
But what I see, well, yeah, exactly. What I see is, especially when we talk about Republican versus Democrat Party, I see that because I don't consider myself either of those parties. I'm definitely very, very, very left. But I don't consider myself either of those parties. Because what I observe is that if I have to choose between those two, I significantly agree with more ideas presented by the Democrat Party. I agree with almost none of the ideas I've heard from the Republican Party. But what I see is that the Republican, there's a lot of yucky, especially in the last several years. I feel like it's gotten more blatant and more kind of normalized. But what I was going to say is that The Republican Party, I see, has a lot of really oppressive ideologies that they put forth, but
Mm-hmm.
they have, like, they will do whatever the hell is needed to try to get that stuff through. Like, they will
Yeah.
do what needs to be done to get
Yeah.
their awful, oppressive stuff voted on and approved and empowered, and the strategy, like all the strategy that has
They
led to
vote.
the Supreme Court looking the way that it
Yes.
looks right now. Like that has been
Exactly.
years of strategy. And now they've got
Exactly.
that, they got that majority, and they're just immediately getting to work on, awful, awful stuff.
Yep.
Whereas I see the Democrat Party, again, where I agree with significantly more of their ideas, but they uh, are basically sort of wet noodle, like they don't really seem to have
Yeah.
the kind of oomph to actually
Yeah.
do
Get stuff
stuff.
done. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, like there's sort of this I feel like there's this desire to have this reputation as, we're the higher
Mm-hmm.
ground, we're above all of
Mm-hmm.
this. We would never stoop to this level, but it's in such a way
Right.
where there are small things here and there, but nothing quite as
Mm-hmm.
groundbreaking, earth shattering as some of the stuff that the right side has been pushing. Like, the destruction of Roe v. Wade, like that is
Yeah.
earth-shatteringly impactful.
It
And I just
is.
have
It's
not seen things on that
unbelievable.
level of impact. And so,
Yeah. And
and that's, I was going to say, I think that's among many reasons. That would say that was on the
mm,
list of reasons of why we were wanting to at least try out
yeah.
non-USA for a living. I don't know if we're going
Yeah.
to be here long term. Like, we're going to try it out for a while. We'll see what we think. Maybe we'll go back.
You
Maybe
can
we'll try
always come
something else. I
home.
don't really know. Exactly.
You can always
Exactly.
come home.
Like we're renting our house. We didn't sell it. That sort of thing.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
but yeah. Like, there's just the writing I feels like is on the wall in a lot of ways that are kind of disturbing in terms of legislation, and then the way that that legislation
Yeah.
impacts marginalized people. So, I'm a little dicey on what that will look like, but in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, just sort of the effectiveness of these parties, I just am not seeing the impact from the Democrat Party that I really wish that they were having.
I know. I love Michelle Obama saying when they go low, we go high. But I kind of feel like we should be saying things like, no offense, I'm a huge fan of Michelle Obama. I wish there were people a lot around like her when I was growing up. And I wonder how I would be different if I could see it. Oprah was around when I was growing up, but if I could see someone like Michelle Obama, how would I be different if I had that in
Hmm.
my growing up years? But I love that she says when they go low, we go high. But I kind of feel like when they go low, we should go lower. Like I just feel like it's not working in the way that I want it to be working. Sorry, that was
You know
just me
what?
feeling my feelings.
You know what? I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. Honestly, I feel like, how can we get to a space when we are kind of paying attention bigger picture? Like, how can we be
Yeah,
effective, right? Like, with the work that I do, so the
exactly.
ways that I communicate on social media and the ways that I serve
Yes.
my business clients, like, I want to be effective. And so,
Yeah.
even when I'm talking about like developing racial equity strategy for organizations, like, people need to be educated, and sometimes there are people that push back against this stuff because they don't know, like, they need to be educated. That's important. It's part of the strategy, culture shifting, normalizing, all that sort of stuff. But in the strategy, there needs to be something built in where eventually you are holding people accountable for these
Accountable.
values and for these commitments, right? And that's part of being
Yeah.
effective. Like, we can't just sort of, hey, we need to talk about this. We need to get group consensus before we actually do anything that advances racial equity. Like, no, that it can't be that. Like, leadership
No.
has to think about what is required to be effective. I think if you steamroll over
Yes.
people without any preparation, that creates that creates friction that probably could have been avoided if you're a little more
Yeah.
strategic with some of that. But again,
Yeah.
eventually you get to a space where we need to actually develop mechanisms of accountability for brand new people who might be on sort of entry level spaces, all the way up to CEO and board. Like, everybody needs to be bought in and on board with that and evaluated on those things if we're really trying to see that transformation.
I love that you say that. I think it's important. And I love that you are doing this work because you have such a clear vision as to how things work. Why did you decide when you were out there at university taking your degree and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. How did you get into this work? Like, how did you start working for the public housing board? Like, what was it that gave you the fire in your belly that said, this is the path I'm taking. This is how I'm going to apply my education.
Yeah. So when I went to college, so I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. Um, I
I
kind
love
of
Seattle, by the
stumbled
way.
into this. Seattle's such an interesting. It's an interesting. I'll say it's a quirky city. Like there's some cool stuff there. Well, that's neither here nor there. I went to the University of
That's every
Washington.
city, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you know how it is. I
I
went to the
do.
University of Washington. Uh, I'm taking gen eds, general education requirements, and UW actually has this program called American Ethnic Studies. So it's an
Oh,
undergrad program that essentially is it's essentially a CRT program, but it's called American Ethnic Studies. And just taking gen eds, I just stumbled on this program, and I think it was the 101 level class, American Ethnic Studies, and just the stuff I learned in that class. Like that's the first time I learned that race is not biological. Like that was a concept created by people specifically to oppress. They had this
mm-hmm.
whole video series we watched where they even did like blood draws of all these students in a class of various races, and there's like no way you can tell who's racist, who's from the blood draw. Like all this information, learning this history about all these people, ways that Black people contributed to U.S. history, Indigenous people,
Yeah.
Asian American people, Latinos, like all these significant contributions to what makes the U.S. what it is now in all of the best ways that I never learned in K through 12, despite I was enrolled in an international college prep curriculum in high school, and we didn't get any of that.
Any of
So
that.
my mind
Yeah.
was just so blown by that information that I'd never gotten that I absolutely fell in love with the program.
Decolonizing your mind.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so I had just such this mind blowing experience that I was like, oh my goodness, I know that whatever it is that I do vocationally, I want making a change in these areas to be a part of it. So I'm pushed all my chips in, like I'm going to major in this. I'm not going to double, I'm not going to mind. Like this is what I want
All
to
of it.
do with my life.
All in.
Exactly. And that's what sort of got started way back in college, and then it sort of influenced my whole professional trajectory. Then eventually took me to the housing authority. Eventually took me to a space where I can do my consulting work full time. So that's like the 30,000 foot view. Like we could literally talk for hours just on that journey because it has been a wild journey of like
I
getting to
bet.
where I am to. It's been a whole strange, unusual journey of things kind of
Yeah.
landing in the right spaces, and that's
Yeah.
just taking all these huge leaps, uh, just because we felt that we were. Ooh, I really feel like this is what we're supposed to do. We don't really have a full landing plan if this doesn't work out, but I think this is what we're supposed to do, and then it keeps working out, keeps working out, keeps working out.
Because it's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You are brilliant at this. So, what made you bring this platform to social media? I was talking to Dr. Angel Jones, who also does very similar work to what you are doing. There's a lot of wonderful people in this space. And just to the listeners out there can never be too many people in this space. And it's really important that we elevate the voices of Black folks in this space, right? These are the people we need to be hearing from first and foremost. I'm not saying that white folks can't be in the space, but I think if white folks are in this space, they need to be in collaboration with Black folks or in a supporting role because you cannot
Yes.
simultaneously benefit and profit from this kind of work. Like it can't, that doesn't feel right. It feels kind of gross and icky. So that we want to put forth the folks that are doing this work. So why do you like, I'm thrilled that you've come to this platform, but what brought you to this platform? Because you are educating a lot of us for free. I'm just saying. Send,
Well, I'll
pay your
so I'll
educators
tell you
because they're
this.
broke.
Well, uh, Anyway, I'll tell you what the breakdown is. I'll tell you what the breakdown is. So, um,
Thank you.
I will say that it started with one sort of thought pattern, but then it
Uh-huh.
has really evolved into a lot more than I ever
Mm,
expected. So
yep.
my initial thought was, hey, I am doing really well with workshops and coaching and strategy. I've got my clients. As much as possible, I want my life to be about liberation, and I don't want to be
Mm,
a grind, like grinding, working, like the sort of that culture,
yeah.
the super
Yes, I'm over it.
capitalistic, oppressive culture. Exactly. So, like, how
Yeah,
can
I'm
I
over
do
it.
everything to develop liberation for my life, for my family, etc.? And so,
Yes.
I'm thinking like I want to have more easy ways for people to know about what I do, to hear how I
Hmm.
communicate and teach about this stuff. Um, and I also want to, I want to make e-courses so more people can learn and
Hmm.
gain and benefit, but even in such a way where I don't necessarily have to engage my hours in those spaces.
Right.
Like, how can I just have more ways
Yes.
to do that? And so my thought was, hey, let me proactively just start doing some stuff on social media. Let me just sort of build a little bit of an audience so people can hear what I do. And then, maybe they'll want to buy some e-courses later on. And my
Yeah,
thought
for
was that I
sure.
was specifically going to make content for businesses and for organizations. Like,
Mm,
that was my thought pattern. And so if
hmm.
I've got my little tiny, few hundred people or maybe 1,000 people that chime in on
Perfect.
that, cool, that's fine.
Yeah,
But then
perfect.
something happened because I was slowly on Instagram, I was on TikTok,
Hmm.
but something really happened on TikTok first, where I made a video, which actually I reposted it to Instagram like a couple of weeks ago. But the video was called Five Ways to Be a Better Anti-Racist. And it was
I
just
saw
like,
that. I
boom,
think
you
I
can do
shared
this.
that.
Boom, you can do this. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm like
Yeah,
walking in the
I'm
forest with
pretty
my
sure I
video on.
shared that one.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
But something about that video, when I shared it last year on TikTok, just so deeply struck a chord with all of these just sort of these people, like not businesses, not corporations, not organizations, but just all of these people that actually like really care about this stuff. Like, whoa, I didn't know about
Hmm.
any of those resources. That's super practical.
Yeah.
That's something I can do today. Oh my goodness, I have this follow up question. Like, oh, I never thought about this. How could like it just started all these great, powerful conversations where I just suddenly realized that, oh, there is an opportunity for me to provide resources for just sort of random social media users that care about
Yeah.
this stuff
Yeah.
and want to do
Yep.
something about it. And I will still have, like, again, I'm very thoughtful and strategic with everything that I do in life. And I also have very solid boundaries. So there's a
I love
lot of
that.
stuff that I feel, thank you. There's a lot of stuff that I feel very comfortable with just sharing and putting onto social media because social media is so good for these little small chunks. You can never
Yeah.
do all of the super deep work through social media, but I can give you a nice
No.
little chunk. Um,
Yeah.
but then there are certain
Something
things
to dosh on.
where, exactly, just something to kind of chew on. But then I will allow you to have your process of kind of extrapolating on that. Like, I'm not going to sit down with somebody and then give them an hour long, like, conversation. Like, I just don't have the capacity
Yeah.
nor the interest of doing
Yeah.
that. Um,
Right.
but then just sort of by doing that, just sort of authentically, I've been able to have such a larger, broader impact. And then just a lot
Hmm.
more businesses have found me. And I
Hmm.
don't do much advertising about my paid and professional services, but people are just enjoying my stuff so much that they're going to my links, they're going to my website,
It's
they're filling in
beautiful
the
stuff.
form.
It's
It's been really
fabulous.
cool. Yeah, yeah, it's been
It's
really
been
cool.
super
And
cool.
so just kind of learning, and I feel like I've become a better speaker and a better communicator by learning how to make content. Like, making social media
Mm,
content is such a specific, particular
it is.
skill that is
It
very
is.
unnatural unless you kind of
It's
practice
true.
some of these things. Because people, like, their attention spans are super short. Like, if you're not getting
Yeah.
right to it within a few seconds, scroll, scroll,
They're
scroll.
out. Yep.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, so like, how do you get
Exactly.
people's attention in a way that's not gimmicky, in a way that has
Hmm.
integrity, in a way that's
Hmm.
authentic, and then it's really useful, and that someone can at least grab that thing and have a good conversation, or hopefully do a thing that helps to actually advance racial equity. Because I'm not here to. I've said this on another friend's podcast before, not podcast, but on live with another friend. I do not do this work to help make better white people. That is not my
No,
motivation for doing this work, right?
not my
Like
ministry.
I think that exactly. Like there may be pieces that sometimes there will be content that's specifically like, hey, white anti-racist. Here's something you need to know about. Here's something you need to think about. But the whole
Yeah.
goal is the liberation and the racial equity for Black, Indigenous, and other people of
Hmm.
color. And so, white people definitely have a role in that. But then sometimes
Yeah.
I'm just going to make content where I'm just talking to Black and brown people, like, hey, I see you in this
Yeah.
area, or hey, here's a resource for you to take care of yourself, or hey, I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
Hey, what's your mental health looking like?
Yeah.
Which is so interesting on social media
Hmm.
because even in those spaces where I'm directly talking to another group of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, there's still white people like, oh, can you tell me more
Oh,
about
yeah.
this? Oh, can you explain this? Like,
Absolutely.
this
Absolutely.
post, like, I'm just going to ignore the comment. I appreciate the engagement. It'll boost the algorithm, but yeah, this post ain't for you. So it's fine.
No. Yes,
It's kind
that's
of
all
this,
right.
this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then again, it's just helpful because then just as stuff that is happening in real time, then it helps me to understand, ooh, if I can share this piece of information to a broad group of folks, or maybe sometimes it's white folks, if they get this, then
Hmm.
all of the Black and brown people that they talk to or interact with are going to benefit. Like I talk about white
Absolutely.
censoring. Like I recently posted a thing about
Oh,
white censoring.
yep.
And that did pretty well because it's interesting when even like picture posts do pretty well, not just reels or whatever. And that's such a relief because again, like if a few people get it and they're around Black and brown
Yep.
people, and they can understand like, oh my gosh, I think about myself all the time. Let me stop doing that. That's
Right.
a benefit.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's community work, and it's work that you're doing kind of on the periphery. Even though you're speaking specifically to a group, other people are taking that information. And it's always the case. Whenever I post something and I'll say, Black women out there, are you struggling with A, B, C, or D? The first comment will be a white woman. I know I'm
And they'll
not
say,
Black,
as a white
but
woman,
yeah, I know I'm not Black, but right. And I'm just like, okay, that's fine. Thanks.
it's cool. It's
Thanks.
cool. It's cool.
The
It's cool.
interaction is good. It's cool. It's fine.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's fine. I just wanted to know how Black people are dealing, especially, we're coming up on
Yeah.
Black History Month. And I made a post on Instagram about how anxious when you're listening to this podcast, it will actually be Black History Month, but I'm always anxious at the expectation that my platform is going to be educating non-Black people about Black History Month, which has been going on for decades, right? So
Mhm.
and then people will come out of the woodwork and ask me to put together a presentation like next week. You've known about Black History Month for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You don't have a budget all of a sudden. You want me to work for free and put something together. What would you like me to teach on? Well, I don't know. What do you want to teach on? I'm like, you know what? I don't want to talk to you anymore. Be gone, because you don't really care about
Right.
this, because you would have put together a budget. You would have hired me at the beginning of January or in December,
Yes.
well in before,
Yes.
so I had enough time to put something together. But no, you're coming to me on the 15th or the 20th of February and asking me to help your business out, but you don't know what you want
Mhm.
me to teach. It's really going to be up to me. Like, I'm over all of this. I had a yoga studio come up and ask me that last year, and I pretended like they weren't talking to me. I'm like, they clearly were not talking to me, because yeah, exactly. No, I'll be sharing some other folks' content. A friend of mine, Alexi Eva Smith, put together a Black History Month bingo card. So she's got a bunch of different things on this bingo card that you can do to celebrate Black History Month. That's what I'll be
I
posting
love
on
it.
my page.
I love it. I
That's the
love it. That's
amount,
awesome.
right? That's the amount of education that I'll be doing, is promoting other educators on my page, because I'm exhausted, and I love your energy. I love the way you show up in the space. I love the stuff that you share. I love how joyful and happy and bright and shiny you are, and we need you in this space. I want to thank you for being on the podcast. My last question to you,
Thank
because I've
you.
dumped a lot of my trauma on you today, and I'm just going to apologize. Maybe send me your bill for your therapist today, because I put you through your paces. What do you do specifically for you, something that is just for you, that contributes to your intentional well-being? What is it that you do that's just all about you, has nothing to do with your family or your kids? It's just something you do for you that elevates your well-being.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a few really quick. I know we're coming up on time. Definitely going to
Yeah, no
therapy.
worries.
Therapy is a big
Yes.
one. And there's times where stuff comes up in therapy, and like I'm not telling nobody. Like I'm just gonna do my thing.
Yeah.
Therapy.
Yeah.
Uh, Something that I do rarely, that I need to do way, 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 way more, is going to the beach. Like I need to go to the beach, put my feet in the sand, put my feet in the water
Yes,
so much more often.
I get that.
Because when I was in Washington, like the forest was I would love taking forest walks. They don't have
Nature.
forests quite in the same way over here, but nature, nature, nature. Yes, nature.
Nature.
And I would say two that I feel like are less. I feel like they're frowned upon for like adults, but I love them and they help me to calm. I love video games, and I love
Good for you.
comedy, especially like YouTube comedy stuff. Like those are
Me
things that
too.
I always sort of like reduce my stress a little bit, and put a little bit of put a little bit of good mood
Joy.
and vibe in my step. Exactly,
I love
joy.
that. I love that. Joy. My favorite videos to watch on YouTube are gym fails. I don't know why I find that so funny, but I just find like, what were you thinking? Because clearly you were not. I love those kind of things. I just, my trainer's always like, why did you watch that? Because now you won't step up on this box and go, I saw the gym fail. But it's just, I love that you do that you invest in comedy, you invest in nature. There's a study out there that says if we spend as little as 2 hours in nature per week, that elevates our mental health and our mood, which makes sense to me. And the fact that you are really taking care of you, because we need you in this work. I want to thank Tony Neighbors from racialequityinsights.com for sharing so much, for allowing me to jump my own trauma all over him, and for sharing in the conversation around intentional well-being. I want to thank everybody who listens to the podcast. Make sure you rate it, subscribe, make sure you go and follow Racial Equity Insights on Instagram and TikTok, and we will link to all the information for you to be in contact with Mr. Neighbors in the show notes, along with all the things that we quoted that we couldn't remember because we were in our feelings or whatever. So we will catch up with you later. Thanks for being a part of the podcast, and don't forget to be intentional with your well-being.
Thank you.
You're welcome.